Today, we are going to talk about breaking down hierarchies and breaking down hierarchies in the public sector. And what does that really mean? What does that require from the leaders? What does it require from the organization? What might be the struggles? And what can we learn about that? And we have two fabulous women who have experience of this. So I would like to introduce our guests, and I'd start with Annette Hennessy, who used to be the chief executive for Merseyside Probation Trust in the UK, and have loads of experience from the work she was doing there with the organization. And then I would like to really warmly welcome you, Mette Aagaard. You are new to me, so I'm really, really curious to hear about your story. You are a development director in the Slagelse Municipality. I don't know if I said it right. Yes, I was practicing today earlier on. So it's a great honor to have both of you here sharing your experiences with us. And then in between, I'd like to just introduce also the team. So Johan, Mellerup Traekjaer, he is, if you will wave, Johan will guide through this process and have the conversation with Annette and Mette. Then we have Maria Lehto, who is going to help with the technical thing. She is in Finland. And then we have Jane Allen in the UK, our master Jane in the UK, also in Amara. And yes, there is a few things in every Amara webinar that I want to just take you through. And that is, as all of us listen to each other and listen to, especially to Annette and Mette, and when we go into the breakout rooms, I would really invite you to not just listen to what people say, but actually really listen to both what people are saying, but also what is your own reaction? What is your thoughts? What is your feelings? What sensation does this give to you? And so really inquire into the moment of yourself as a way of us. That is such an important part of our experience as well. And as a way of starting, we also want to do a practice. So we want you to do something. And Maria, if you could put in the link in the chat to an exercise that we're doing. So we would like you to go on to this link and then choose two cards. One image that represents how you think the traditional public sector organizations look like, and another one what you think that the future or the possible or the like how would that look like. They're going to be very abstract images, and at the end of the webinar we're going to bring them together and show what you actually have showed as another way. And if you're interested in this tool, you can also sign up to use this for your own events. It is a tool that we have developed for our own use. So with that, and one fourth person, I wanted to also introduce you, Persoa, who is also part of, I know I see you are on the screen. Persoa is also part of the Amara team in Sweden, so warm welcome to you as well. So I think that this is all. During this session, we will listen to the interviews, we will go into a breakout room, and then we're going to come back and gather what we have heard and our own thinking and have a way of actually having a conversation together. But with this, I'd like to just one more time say warmly welcome, and I'm really curious to listen into all of the wisdom that these two women have to share, guided by Johan.
All right, I suppose that's my cue. Welcome everyone, and especially welcome to Mette Aagaard, that's the Danish version, and Annette Hennessy. So just a little bit of background. So Mette has been in the space of senior executive leadership most of her adult life, and before she came to Slagelse, she was senior vice president, executive vice president in Novo Nordisk. So it's a major company, and now she's actually gonna run a very, very interesting experiment in Slagelse Municipality, which would be the equivalent of a county, in Great Britain, where the idea is that the whole system or the whole municipality wants to change into a more self-organized, more organic form of governance. So that's very interesting. And Annette Hennessy, as a probation worker for many years, and by the end of your career, you have been running Merseyside Probation Trust. And if to you, whom you have, to whom, what is it I'm saying? I'm just making some rubbish here. To those of you who don't know where Merseyside is, so it's actually where Liverpool is. So we're in northeastern England. So quite a big county there. So you've been running the Merseyside Trust, and that was quite a turnaround you made there, trying to make it into a less top-down system and much more mutual and inclusive system. So that's why the two of you are here. And that's why we want to hear what you have to tell and share your experiences and your knowledge. All right. Let's dig in. No reason to not get it going. So the first question would be, of course, so why should we change our public systems into less hierarchical and top-down to more flat, mutual, and self-organizing systems? And I want to start with you, Mette.
Thank you, Johan, and also thank you for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me in to discuss my favorite subject of all, namely how to basically transform or transition into a completely new organizational paradigm. So your question is extremely relevant, and despite the fact that we think we have at least given part of the answer a couple of years back, we have to answer or ask ourselves that question basically every day. To me, I would actually say, why not? But that, I guess, is just an easy way out. So I think there are mainly two reasons why not only the public sector, but basically everyone needs to change. So the general need is based on the fact that the current organizational model, in my view, and not only in my view, but also documented, has too many dysfunctionalities. So too many people become ill from going to work, too many people lose sight of the meaning of it all, too many people have declining trust, both in public organizations and in private enterprises as well. So there's, I mean, if this was if this was a meal and you had the side effects of that meal to the same extent as we're seeing the side effects of the current organizational model, I'm not sure we would eat it again. I mean, I simply think that the side effects are too severe. And so I've been looking into this for many years, and I found out that while a lot of people agree, they don't know what to put instead. So I think we owe it to ourselves and the rest of the world to try to come up with alternatives to the existing organizational model, and having the energy, the ambition, the will, and the people to embark on that journey, I think places a huge responsibility on our shoulders. Then for the public sector in particular, it's the case in Denmark, and I would assume that it's the case everywhere, that when you look into the demographic development and thus the need for people to provide the welfare that we as a state have guaranteed our citizens that we will provide, we simply cannot close the gap between the supply and the demand in terms of people being able to help us providing welfare to the citizens of this country. So if we don't do anything, we're gonna crash basically. So there's a responsibility and there's a need, which is, I guess, the short answer.
Wow, that's great. What do you say, Annette?
Well, there are some similarities to, that I was thinking about, Mette, but I mean, from my point of view, looking ahead, and the challenges I think that all countries are going to face, all organisations, but in particular the public sector. If you think about you know, what's happening in terms of the climate emergency, the pandemics, you know, the kind of pressures on the kind of the system really in terms of poverty and economics and, you know, all that you can see coming over the horizon. The public sector, I think, in particular, is going to be in the firing line in terms of, you know, providing those resources and the support to civic society. So anything that releases that kind of creativity and capacity and capability, I think, through changes to do with structures and introducing more fluidity and agility, I think, has got to be the case. And the research is that, you know, that does release that kind of capacity and capability through changing those kind of structures. And the other point I would make also, that anything that kind of makes it a more energizing place for people to come to work, you know, and taps into that kind of that sense of their purpose and joy, has got to be a positive thing, really. Because the assumption I'm making is that a kind of top-down hierarchical organisation isn't that. But for me, I think it's about facing the challenges that are coming over the horizon for us as a planet, as a country, and as organisations.
That's great, thank you. So, what are the greatest challenges to breaking down these old hierarchies? And I'll start with you, Mette, again.
I mean, basically the challenges are lining up. So I think, I mean, there's a lot of kind of like constitutional, or I would say institutional barriers for it, but I think I would like to start in another area. I think the very often unconscious kind of fundamental assumptions about what it takes to have an effective and efficient organization is a huge barrier. So there's so many things that at least I come across, I would say nearly on a daily basis. It's those kind of assumptions that come out as questions or statements like, but there has to be someone who decides, or how do you measure efficiency? I mean, it's all those kind of like basic assumptions in terms of what does good look like, that we use to basically judge whether the new organizational paradigm works or doesn't work. And I think that whole shift in terms of basically replacing what new public management has placed within a lot of us as indicators of success, I think that's a huge challenge. So with that comes the whole kind of habitual thinking and the I mean, just bad habits basically that have been installed in us, because that is what determines success in new public management kind of regime. So that's at least one, if I should pick one that I find difficult and that I will assume will take a long time to de-learn.
That's great. What do you say, Annette?
Well, a couple of things spring to mind for me. The first one, I think, is obviously kind of to do with the inevitably the power that's around with old hierarchies, breaking those down. You know, it's incredibly, you know, asking people to let go of stuff, to let go of their kind of entitlement and their privilege is really, really hard. And I suppose the opposite of that is like that, you know, if you're a follower or an employee, and as we know, I think globally in certain countries at the moment, it's kind of very attractive and very appealing to be told what to do and to be given simple answers. So I think you've got kind of two sides of the coin going on, really, in terms of the whole, you know, breaking hierarchies. But the other thing is also helping to leaders and individuals and well, however you want to term it, people to be able to live with uncertainty and kind of the fluidity that breaking down those old structures mean. So yeah, some very, very, very powerful entrenched habits, I think, that it's really makes it a kind of uphill struggle. Well, then that's the business of leadership, I think, or the business of all of us on screen.
Great, thank you. And so I suppose we're at the end of the paradox, or we're coming to it, because we have this whole notion of breaking down the hierarchies and actually disposing of the classical leadership roles. But still, yet this is very much a leadership endeavor. So I'm wondering, what role does leadership play in this transition into more flatter hierarchies? And I'll start again with you, Mette.
I think I lost you there for a second, but I'm back.
All right, sorry. So the idea, you know, this whole transition, the interesting thing is that we want to go away from too much leadership. On the other hand, the whole transition into this space has a lot to do with leadership. So I'm just wondering, what is the role of leadership in getting less leadership, so to speak?
You want me to start, Johan?
Yeah, I do.
And I think it's an interesting question, because to me it has a double meaning, so to speak. So leadership in terms of people in formal leadership positions, that's like one meaning of the word leadership, but leadership is also like a discipline that you exercise. And I think it holds true that for the first meaning of the word, like people in formal leadership positions, yes, then it's true, we will have fewer of these, or more precisely put, we will probably have more of these, but it will be distributed leadership. So I don't really see that we will have less leadership if we agree to redefine the meaning of the word. So yeah, so if it's leadership as in closely tied to a person, then that has to change dramatically. If it's leadership as a discipline, that has to change dramatically too. So your question was, what role does it play? And to me, it's like if we agree to the meaning of the word in that it means that it's distributed, and the people who are being brought together in a collaborative team, we call it circles in our part of the, or in our organization, we are basically asking everybody to assume leadership, but as a collaborative discipline. So in that sense, I think that it actually requires for more people to take leadership, but for formal leaders to step down. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much. That's great. What do you say, Annette?
Well, a lot of what Mette said resonates with me. I mean, I think leadership was the term leader kind of like gets in the way of what leadership is about, I think. So it's not a title or a position. And increasingly, I think it's, for me, the most helpful definition is what you dare to stand beside, I think, and how you choose to show up. So in terms of like, what does the role of leadership play in such a transition? I mean, in my experience, a lot of it on with hindsight and at the time, I think, was what choices I made to show up as a human and where I put my attention. So of course, some of it is the kind of like, there's some fundamental stuff in that you kind of keep your eye on, but it was also about listening to people, working in partnership, developing people, having the kind of courage, I think, as well, to say, I don't have all the answers, but we might find them together. So kind of like not so much about knowing and telling, but about finding out together and asking. So it's kind of like, when I look back, I think some of those things were really quite simple, what felt the hardest to do and the most important to do. So yeah, I don't know what. So I think that's probably what I want to say right now. I'll be really interested to hear what what feedback is from the participants as well.
That's great.
Can I add a comment?
Oh yes.
Johan,
Yeah.
Basically where we are in the process right now in Slagelse is we've basically just begun the journey. So we are not there yet. I mean, what we're doing right now is we are basically working in this continuum between the old-fashioned hierarchical organization and then basically trying to install these new organizational paradigms. And what I have come to learn so far in the process is that, I mean, we're basing the transition on the coalition of the willing, you can say. So those who really want to be part of this, they basically raise their hand, and then we offer them some competency development in terms of, for example, taking this discussion on what does leadership look like, how does a team work, how do we make decisions, how do we form the collaborative teams and so forth. So what I have found is that the organizational unit that seem to have like the best momentum in this journey are units where the traditional leader, i.e. the department manager or whatever they are called, they have the ability to kind of refrain from diving into the operational stuff every day. So, I mean, there's basically no leader that I am aware of in the public sector that only does leadership. I mean, most of them also do some operational stuff. But those who cannot kind of add a perspective that has to do with the development and the learning of their team, they find it really hard to ensure momentum and progress in this journey. They're being overwhelmed by the operational and tactical day-to-day tasks that they think they have to deal with. So already now, even way before we are there, and I think it's going to take many years, what we see now is that there's definitely already a leadership ability that is required for the transition. And I think this is no different than other transitions. And that is to not focus on the day-to-day, but to basically focus on the ability of the team to embark on the journey. So already there we kind of see, the need for a changed approach to leadership.
I think that that's a really good point, Mette. What I'd also add to that is learning to trust other people and to support people, to support others as well, and actually to stand back much more and be able to see that actually you're there for them. And as you say, for me, what comes home to mind is that kind of difference between when you're on a board between the exec and the non-executive function, is just trying to kind of separate those out.
All right, so that leads me to something which is what we work with in Amara, which is one of our primary things. We work with this space of psychological maturity. That the leader has to be some kind of a mature person for the leader to actually construct a reality that's sophisticated enough to deal with the things that might pop up in the organization on a moment-to-moment basis, and also still having the capability of looking out into the future. So I'm just wondering, what does it take to be a leader in such an organization where you are, in fact, maybe not even a leader, but you need to do leadership, and that's important. What does it take for the individual? And I'll start with you again, Mette.
That's a humongous question, Johan.
Yeah, I know.
So, I think I would just take what comes to mind. I mean, psychological maturity is a good overall phrase. I think one of the things that are important in order to safeguard the what can you say, or to prevent informal power as well as formal power to overrule the good processes in a team. But what we are talking a lot about in our organization is to learn to distinguish between what is your preference and what is your tolerance. So a lot of leaders, I think, especially those with huge egos, and there are a lot of them among leaders, in my experience, what I see is that if you can navigate within your zone of tolerance instead of in your zone of preference, it actually provides a much bigger opportunity for other people to take part in the decision making and take responsibility and basically have this non-hierarchical approach. So, and maybe that does require psychological maturity, but you definitely need to understand that I might not think that the solution that that Johan is coming up with is the best, but if it's good enough for now, then and if I am comfortable, or you can say that at least it's within my tolerance zone to let Johan run with it, then I'll have to let go. And I think that requires a self-awareness that some leaders have and some leaders definitely do not have.
That's brilliant. Very interesting. So what do you say, Annette?
Well, I agree with what Mette is saying, really. I think for me, it is actually about, it starts on the inside as well. Kind of, because I have a firm belief that, you know, if you're not aware of yourself and the impact that you have and how you're responding to situations which are extremely challenging or difficult, the danger is that then you transfer that onto the rest of the organisation. You know, so in a sense, you're kind of like, you know, you're inflicting your difficulties on everybody else. So for me, that, you know, so having a coach was extremely helpful for me, because it was a place in which I could kind of be vulnerable and, you know, do all that kind of working out and understanding, as it were. And so that, and then that enabled me, I think, to have much better relationships and better dialogue, to be able to kind of have conversations that weren't necessarily about, as you say, my preferences, but, you know, were much more about, okay, well, how do we sort this out together? How do we, you know, how do you hold on to some of those, when to hold on and when to let go? So it's kind of holding on to all those tensions and all those paradoxes really in the organisation. Yeah, so so it's the inside out stuff, I think, that matters as much as what you do on the outside. That helps you to do the real work in the organisation, which is lead through those transitions, if that makes sense. But again, interested to hear, you know, what other participants think. That was the real work, was growing me.
Yeah.
I actually find another thing that I find challenging personally, because it's this transition where we are moving in and out of the old-fashioned organization and the new one, is to help myself and others not being too confused about the fact that sometimes I need to apply the old-fashioned leadership style, and sometimes I will apply the new leadership style. And I think, and it requires of me an enormous consciousness in terms of when do I apply what, which I am sad to say I'm not always that perfect person who can be 100% aware of the situations I'm in. And I think that's a transitional issue when you are basically changing the paradigm, that you can't shift from one leadership style to another. And sometimes the context requires that you remember how to navigate in the old part of the system. So if that makes sense to all of you, like, I can see definitely for the people working close to me and that are part of this process, I need to be very explicit when I apply the kind of hierarchical leadership style in decision making or whatever, because otherwise they think I'm not serious about the stuff that we do. And that is actually quite cumbersome, I would have to say.
And I agree, you do have the capacity to say to people, get off the shit when it's burning. You know, You know, we can't sort of like can't sort of ask, okay, what's the consensus here? Should we get off the ship or not? Yeah, I completely agree. You have to have the ability to employ all those styles.
So that's very interesting. So this whole notion of framing the situation is highly important, and I suspect that that's an issue that we see many places, that we just act without actually framing why we're doing what we're doing. And that's probably what we would call more mature behavior. So, and I was wondering, so what do you think about, so the last question we can take about the future. So Barbara Kellerman from Harvard, she has written some books about, and she's actually predicting, well, leadership will probably end because there is, you know, people are fed up with it and the resistance is so great. You talked about that in the beginning, Mette. But I'm just wondering, what does it look like? Is it actually ending, or is it just going to change to something different? So what do you think, Mette?
I haven't read the piece written by Barbara Kellerman, and so I'm sure she has a super valid point, but so commenting only on the headline, I don't think leadership is dying at all. I just think it will reshape into something different, and it may be confusing for some that we are using that word because it has connotations of a person. So and to give an example of that, we have in the teams that we establish, we call them circles. There's a mandatory role in there which is called a lead in English. If we apply that word in Danish, people confuses it with leader. So we've actually had to come up with a different word that can travel in a Danish municipality. And if I am to translate it directly, it's the person safeguarding the purpose. So we needed to basically, because otherwise people felt that a lead and a leader, I mean, it sounds the same, and so they thought it was the same, and they were starting to basically duplicate the assumptions in terms of what a leader in a traditional sense should do. So what I experience from the teams that we have is that if no one assumes leadership, i.e. if no one assumes responsibility for the decision making and the momentum and the progress, then the teams do not function. So that to me is a testimony to the fact that we do need leadership, not as a person, but as a collaborative discipline. And that we need much more of. So in that sense, I dare to disagree with Barbara without having known exactly what her point is.
That's good. What do you say, Annette?
Well, I did a little bit of research. I probably had more time than you, Mette. What I found interesting was a couple of points that she made, which I thought were really good ones. Is we should study so-called bad leaders as well as good leaders to kind of find out, you know, what it is that they do. How do they make that work? Fascinated by that now at the moment in the UK, but less said about that the better. And she said that bad leaders also have bad followers, which I thought was a really interesting concept about, you know, so that made me think that maybe one of the purposes of leadership is always to kind of like make sure that people are able to challenge you or to challenge leadership. And in terms of it dying out, I suppose I go back to what I think it is about, really. It can be found anywhere, and it's like how you choose to show up and what you dare to stand beside. So I suppose my belief is that we're going to need as much of that as we can get in the future, whether that's in an organisational context or not. But no, what little I read of her, she was very provocative, what she was saying.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So thank you. I think we need to stop here, and now we're going to create some breakout rooms so people can share. And when we are in the rooms, try to think of what did you just hear, what's interesting, and where are you coming from, and then we'll just have a dialogue. And when we come back, you'll have the possibility to ask some questions to Mette and Annette. So some good questions out there, and we're not too many, so you can just unmute yourself and ask a question to Annette and Mette.
I can start. This is Ville from Switzerland and Finland. Mette, you mentioned the zone of preference and tolerance. I like the idea very much. Does it also apply to kind of concrete behaviors? And what is your experience of introducing and keeping up such zones?
Thanks for your question, Ville. I would like you to add a few more words to when you say behavior. So did you have anything particular in mind, or?
I kind of connected the zone in concrete behaviors. Like here in Switzerland, we have a pharma company, Novartis, who have kind of differentiated between preferred behavior, tolerated and not tolerated behavior. And in the last years, they have had quite many managers with big egos finding other companies to work for.
Yeah, so I think it sounds as if it's the same kind of logic, you can say. I think that the difference is that we would never define preferred and tolerated behavior from a top perspective. That would need to be defined by the people who are working together. So one team of teachers might have a preference for a certain behavior or tolerance for a certain behavior, whereas a group of architects have a completely different one. So we would never, I mean, while I could definitely have an opinion about what would be a preferred behavior in a transition as the one that we're going through, we would probably never dictate it, because I think it would be counterproductive in terms of the whole value system that we're trying to install. But having said that, yes, it can definitely also go to behavior. So I think what I have seen in a lot of organizations where I work is that some conflicts are based on the fact that that I think that you're crazy because you're not like me. And I assume that all of you working as consultants, and it sounds as if your collective background indicates that you are working with this already. So any kind of self-awareness in terms of, I know you're not crazy because you're not like me. You're just not like me. I mean, to expand the horizon and to basically also figure out or find out and learn that you can gain from having diversity in terms of behavior and personality profiles. It is, in my experience, a little hard to move to that very personal level of feedback to begin with. So when we talk about preferences and tolerances, we start talking about it in terms of decision making. So if you are making a suggestion, you and I are in a team together, you're making a suggestion for an initiative that you would like to make that you think benefits the citizens that we're working for. Then it has to be outside of my tolerance zone in order for me to say no. So we don't agree. I mean, and you know all of this because you've written about, you know all about the teal concept, but the way that we make decisions is based on consent and not agreement. It's not consensus. So we are using it in the decision-making models to basically say, if Ville has a proposal, I have to come up with an argument for not consenting that resides within the purpose of our team and not my personal preference. And it's super hard. I mean, I see these objections or these disguised as preferences. So people, they argue, well, it's not good enough for now, and it doesn't have to do with it's wrong in the light of our purpose. But if you really look into it, it's actually a preference that's disguised as an unwillingness to basically consent. So it takes a while before we get to the personal behavior level, but in a more mature organization, I can't see why not. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and all the best for your journey. That sounds exciting.
Thanks a lot. I think I need it.
You want to add something to that, Annette?
Well, it's just a fascinating concept, isn't it? Because obviously the organisation that I used to belong to, its core purpose was to essentially change people's behaviours, and quite often I would find that people working for the organisation were more badly behaved, and that was, you know, so that's quite a kind of like a paradox, really. And but we did go through an exercise where we involved everybody in drawing up a kind of like, you know, how they wish to be treated and how they would treat others and how they would particularly treat the people who are receiving the service. So that was, as you say, Mette, has to be something that's kind of like, it was iterative and it was agreed by the whole organisation. So, I mean, it took forever, but it was the conversation really that mattered the most, as opposed to what came out of it, really. So I won't prolong it because I'm sure there are other questions.
Yeah, I hope so.
I have a question. Annette, you stressed the importance of the inner work being done in order to foster this appreciation for leadership as a discipline, as opposed to leaders as formal roles in an organization. I'm just wondering what you did to support that. Did you use an assessment, for example, of psychological maturity, or what facilitated that, and what were the challenges in aligning people instead of going off in their own directions of personal development?
Well, I suppose the inner work that I was referring to was probably my own in the first instance, and you know, it was hugely valuable to me having a personal coach, having action learning sets with other people in my position, but also inviting into the organisation a kind of coaching approach for other senior managers, but also other managers and staff in the organisation. So in generally trying to encourage that kind of an awareness, I think, of the impact on you of work. But also, I kind of, when I look back, we did a lot of things to change perspectives and mindsets, and not all of that was about inner work. Some of that was bringing in new approaches, bringing in, when we were going through the transition, we brought in the university to do some live action research for people. So kind of just looking for different ways to kind of, I suppose, you know, develop that kind of understanding of self.
Yeah. So a coaching mindset and a set of skills is a big transformation in itself from a normal style of leadership. I think that's an incremental change that sounds like it's necessary.
We're trying to foster curiosity as opposed to knowing, I suppose, knowing the answers.
Knowing and telling, you mentioned that. Yeah.
Particularly with you know, the work that was actually being done, you know, because it's firm believer in that our work with offenders was always about partnership and not doing two. So just trying to create that environment.
Thank you.
Brilliant. You want to comment? Yeah, want to add, Mette?
I want to be respectful of the fact that there are others who have questions, but just a reflection on my part is that on one hand, my experience is that very young leaders, I mean, for example, those who are being, who get at a leadership position for the first time, are super busy proving themselves. And unless it comes natural to them, they kind of look into the very old-fashioned way of leadership to look for role models. And that's counterproductive. On the other hand, very, not very old, but older and more senior and mature leaders who have had success practicing the old-fashioned leadership style have a super hard time letting go of that and learning the new capabilities. So I still don't know whether it's easier to work with a young, inexperienced first-time leader, or to basically chip into the maturity and maybe the greater self-confidence that you would have as a more experienced leader. So there's a challenge in both ends of the pipeline, you can say.
That's great. So we have to be mindful of the time, but perhaps one quick question, if there's one, or else we'll have to. Yeah. I suspect there's not. So I think thank you so much. I want to change to Heidi.
Thank you, Johan and Mette and Annette for these conversations, and those of you who brought in questions. And I wanted to just point out that this is the kind of work we do in Amara. So, for example, Jane has been working with individual coaching and setting those action learning sets that Annette was mentioning, and supporting organizations, individuals for years. To actually, as these are long process. I think you mentioned that, Mette, that this is the start and it's going to take several years. So this is the work we do, and if we are very happy to have any conversations about any possible opportunities that you have around this, and of course other organizational changes as well. And I wanted to also bring forth the images that you were choosing, hopefully at the start. So we were asking, what does traditional public organizations look like? And these are the images that you chose. And these are which I see has quite a different energy in the renewed organizations. And I want to, at this point, also say that, so the Amara tools that you used, it's a free tool that we have developed over the last year, actually, for doing online coaching, online facilitation. So you're very welcome to sign up and use that also. And with that, I would like to say thank you for everyone, for your time. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your questions and for giving your gifts to actually showing up at this place together with us for this hour. And we do like to check out in one way or another. So I'd ask you to, maybe as we have 2 minutes, to just turn off or put on your mic and just let this group flow and say out loud. It doesn't matter if we all speak at the same time. Just say one sensation you're having as you are leaving this webinar.
Super inspiring. Thank you.
Very connected.
Very hopeful.
Energized.
Gratitude.
Thank you.
Hopeful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.